what's up, everybody? It's Jourdan-Cha'Taun. Thank you for tuning in to Chefish. Today, we have Chef Briana, Bri, out of the east side of Atlanta. And ultimately, she went to school in New York City and studied at NYU, which is no easy feat. If you don't know what NYU is, like the mecca of schools that you even really want to get into in the country, first of all, the melting pot, the different energies. And so, first of all, coming from the east side of Atlanta and making it in New York, okay? Because when I first landed in New York, I was making $7.49 an hour in the kitchen, coming from Seattle, Washington. And I was making like 14 to 17 when I left up under the sous chef. So I'm like, oh, yes, arrogant. Everything's going to be great. And ultimately, it was a lot harder to get into.
We've all had those super low paying jobs. I had definitely a 12 an hour job. And after that, I was like, never again. I got to step it up.
Well, but after, I think that we'll get into that. I do want to come back to that because talking about money and wages in the kitchen is important to me. So when we get to the main course, we're going to retouch that subject. But you studied food and like science, right?
It was food studies. So it was more of an anthropological look at food and culture. Okay. So I specifically look at the Afro-diasporic food. Okay. Mostly from West Africa across the Atlantic to the American South, Louisiana, and then, of course, the Caribbean as well.
Okay. See? So she really knows about food. She's not just saying she's a chef. She's really a chef out here. She probably has more knowledge than a lot of chefs, actually, because once you study, that takes you to the next level mentally. But when she was studying, right, she had always been in the kitchen. It was something that you picked up naturally. And so at some point you started working in restaurants. And so that's like my brief bio to introduce like who you are. Okay. But now she's at Rocksteady Atlanta as the executive chef, which is one of Atlanta's top premier spots to go to. And she was really a pastry chef. So we for sure are about to get into the main course and talk about how she slid, because it's not an easy task to do sweet and savory, and definitely not easy to get the respect in the kitchen. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate her time. It's a busy Monday. And chefs usually have a lot of work to do. And so thank you so much.
No problem.
Like, you don't even know.
Not a problem at all. My pleasure.
And so for my Chefies out there, I know you're probably wondering, how do I know of her or anything like that? We don't necessarily have a relationship, but I became a fan of your work because somebody on Twitter named Jaya Cooks, but she's a pastry and now savory executive chef in North Carolina.
North Carolina, yeah.
Yeah. But she posted one of her sweaters for Dope Girls Cook. And I'm like, Dope Girls do cook. I want one. And so then I found out, oh, she's in Atlanta. Oh, I'm about to figure out where she's at. And I seen you the first time I came, actually, just in passing. And I'm like, yes. And I was excited to taste your dessert. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm a fan of hers out the gate. So I'm like, for you to transfer over being to the executive chef, like, so now that I've given them a little taste, I'd like you to explain a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Again, my name is Briana Riddock, Chef Bri for short. And I've had a really interesting ride in the culinary field. I definitely think I've had a overall well-rounded experience. So I've come from the kitchen and I've come from the editorial side with cooking. So I feel like I really started off as a blogger, probably in my early 20s. When I graduated college, when I graduated, 2011, it was in the middle of the recession. So I originally couldn't find a job, moved back home with my mom, went to University of Florida for undergrad and studied telecommunications. So that's like a form of media. So I figured, I could start a blog and do that. But then when I moved back to Atlanta, I actually had a short stint in culinary school. And then I was still looking for other things to do. And I ended up finding the program at NYU, which you had already mentioned. And then I moved to New York to do that program. So while I was there, I actually did a lot of editorial work. So I had a few different internships at a lot of media companies. And then I was doing a lot of recipe development and recipe writing and writing articles about food and kind of using what I was learning in school to cover food topics. And then I actually got a grant while I was at NYU to study in Paris. So I went to Paris for a couple of months because NYU has a Paris location.
Right.
And I studied African chefs in Paris because there's a lot of Africans in France because France colonized a lot of African countries. So there's a lot of French speaking Africans that also reside in France and in Paris.
But I feel like from what I learned about you, that you really picked up the camera early, way before, because you started cooking for your mom. Mm-hmm. And that's where, to me, from what I picked up on, where it kind of started.
Yeah. So I guess I was super blessed because I didn't know like other people's parents didn't cook every day. So my mom cooked every day. So, I mean, she was the mom's mom where she cooked every day. She made our plate. Like, I don't think we started making our own plates until like maybe high school where she was like, okay, you guys can do this yourself. But she made breakfast for us every day. Mm-hmm. She came straight home.
We love it.
And cooked dinner. So I learned just the process of continuously cooking from my mom. But I also think I learned more of the culinary techniques from watching Food Network. Okay. So that was in the 90s where like Food Network was like the thing. And I was obsessed with Food Network my mom said I was watching it since I was like a toddler. Yeah. So I was already naturally drawn to cooking unknowingly, just naturally. And
because you had an easy bake oven.
I had an easy bake oven.
This is what I'm saying. It repeats it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I had the easy bake oven, the super original one. It was more of like a square boxy one. Like the new ones now, it was like off-white or maybe like white. I don't even remember. But now the new ones look all kind of like high tech.
Yeah.
And then you just mentioned blueberry muffins in our pre-show. And then I used to get the little blueberry muffin packets where it had like the blueberry pellets in there, like the little fake blueberries, and, bake that in my easy bake oven. But yeah, I think I learned the consistency of cooking from my mom, but the actual techniques and new ingredients from Food Network because my mom is Jamaican. So even though I was born and raised in Atlanta, I didn't necessarily eat Southern food at home. So there's a lot of stuff that I didn't experience that was traditionally Southern or traditionally like Black American food until after I left the house. So,
and how old were you when that happened?
Not until I was like 18, 19, 20.
Okay, so I feel like now we're going to start diving into the main course. But what I wanted to circle back to before we go there is, though, you picked up the camera, your brother's camera. So she was making dinners for her mom after work. Even though she cooked a lot, you basically took on that responsibility.
Yeah, it's because I was home after college. So I was helping my mom cook more so she wouldn't be like the only one cook. Okay. And also that would be just selfish that, I wouldn't help out around the house. So yeah, I think around like 21, 22.
But not everybody does that. And then not everybody picks up a camera and builds a blog. Like, I'm like, you're just casually like, yeah. And
I just thought that was just like the next.
No, blogging is super hard.
It was super hard
because content is hard. And now it's even different, but especially in the beginning. So
it was like, super hard at the time because I spent a lot of time learning how to code like the HTML and like changing the back end. Cause there wasn't like Squarespace and all those like newer website builders at the time. So you had to do like a lot of stuff manually. Right. But I picked up the photography pretty naturally because I had already had experience.
Picking up your brother's.
Yeah. Using camera.
When you did that?
Probably early 20s. Yeah. When I got out of college, like 21. So that was natural. And at the time, I think I was working at Best Buy. So it was easy for me to figure out what equipment I needed because I just got it from work or just, ask whomever I need to ask at work. So that kind of naturally fell into place.
It seems like a lot of it did. So when you went to Paris after you were studying for a while for NYU, you said sent you there, right? Mm-hmm. How do you feel like, what was that like? And then how do you feel like that has impacted you now where you're at?
I loved it. I mean, I think the most important thing is that I had freedom to decide what I wanted to study. And then that the school thought it was a valid project for me to even work on in the first place. But I think because it just gave me a closer connection to understand Afro-Caribbean food as a whole. Because when you look at the diaspora and you look at where a lot of dishes originated and kind of how they transformed over time to reach the Caribbean and to reach the South, you realize that a lot of the dishes are very similar, if not the same, with a little bit of differences, probably regional based off of the availability of whatever ingredients.
Right.
So I think it just gave me a closer understanding of how we are much more connected through food than we realize.
Right. Which is a beautiful thing to me. So when you got back from Paris, where were you at in your career?
By the time I got back from Paris, it was time to graduate. So I ended up actually moving to Alabama. So I got a job with a company at the time. They're a different company now, but randomly in Alabama, there is a huge building of test kitchens. And I think Alabama or Birmingham used to be a place of publishing.
Okay.
So they still had some of that era of publishing there. So I was working for a company where they did a lot of the recipe development that went into a lot of magazines. So like, for example, Food and Wine and Cooking Light at the time, Coastal Living, People Magazine, all those magazines, all of the recipes came out of that building.
That hub.
So that's...
How did you even figure out that was there though?
I was just applying to places. I think it was like a fellowship program thing, but I knew that I wanted to get into food writing and recipe development. Right. So that's how I ended up there.
But you were already kind of doing that.
I was. And honestly, I should have.
You were already doing it. I say everything that ever happens is preparing us for what's coming.
Yeah. And I think I was just so anxious to not be in New York and not have something that I took, the first opportunity that I got, which is ironic because literally as soon as I moved to Alabama, I actually got an opportunity to stay in New York. And I was like, oh my God, I should have just maybe waited around at least for like a month or two. But
exactly.
I was like, I couldn't afford to have a lapse or a break in my resume or just in life. So I was like, whatever the next opportunity is, I'm going to take it. But I think it was a great opportunity because I ended up meeting a lot of people in editorial and, everybody ends up switching jobs. People end up in different places. So now the people that I met in Birmingham, they're in different locations. So if I need to reach out to them for something, somebody might work for Bon Appetit now, or somebody might work somewhere else where I can still, I can still have my hand in editorial if I needed to. But I mean, obviously, as of right now, I'm 100% committed to my job as the executive chef because it's a very demanding position.
Very demanding and time consuming. And so when you started really working in the kitchen, what position did you start at?
So I didn't stay in Birmingham long. One, because I just didn't enjoy the city. Yeah. And I didn't feel like there was any growth for me. So I left Alabama or Birmingham after less than 1 year. So by the time I came back to Atlanta, the editorial space isn't here per se as, I would find in New York. So I think one of my chef friends got me a job and I was a prep cook at a restaurant.
And so for anybody tuning in that might not know what a prep cook is, you essentially are going in and working in the restaurant and prepping the food. Yeah. So you're not necessarily on the line. Right. You can be on the line, but usually that's not your position. You're prepping stuff that's going to hit the line, or if there's banquets or whatever is going on, depending on what type of kitchen you started out in.
Yeah. So the prep cooks, they usually have a morning day shift to where they're doing most of the actual preparation for any of the dishes. So anything that takes a long time to cook or that includes a lot of heavy knife skills. So that's like sauces, fabricating meats or breaking down any poultry or seafood, prepping certain things that take a long time to cook on the stove or a long time that cooks in the oven. And what kind of
restaurant was that?
American, European, French, American fusion.
Something.
Yeah.
A lot of things. They were a little mixture. Okay. And then from there, you also started doing dinner parties. So was this all in the same time frame?
This was all in the same time frame. So I think I skipped over some steps, but so I had already had prior kitchen experience because when I left college, let me just say that one little bit. When I left college and I was blogging, I was actually staging in restaurants for free.
Yeah.
While I was still blogging and working.
Yeah, stage.
A stage is essentially a working interview or like a working internship.
To me, it's a free work.
Free work.
And they decide if they want you.
Free work.
So how many hours were you doing when you were staging?
I probably used to go, at that time, I think it was at the Optimist. I probably was going in like maybe once or twice a week.
Okay.
And actually like working service. I was on garde manger. Garde manger is like the salad
cold station.
Mm-hmm. What was the other place I saw? I can't even remember. But anyways, so I had that prior kind of restaurant experience. So I always had my foot in the restaurant and then a foot out because at that point I never really felt like I belonged anywhere. Even prior to that, like there typically wasn't a lot of Black cooks in the kitchen, heavily Latin staff. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, more of the higher positions was primarily male, white staff.
Yes.
So I was like, no, I don't think the kitchens are for me because
there's a lot of racism and sexism in the kitchen.
I was like, this isn't for me.
Misogyny.
So I always was like, I would go into a kitchen and then I never felt welcome. So I, you know, found other things to do. But in lieu, when I left Alabama and came back to Atlanta, I had already had the idea to do a dinner party series. And I had the idea from New York, but I tried to do it in New York. I couldn't quite execute it because I didn't have a car. I was on the train. I was like doing test runs with my friends and I would like be buying all the groceries and carrying my pots and pans on the train. I was like, okay, no, this is not a lot. I was like, this is not going to work and it's not going to work in New York. So by the time I got back to Atlanta, I had a car. I was like, okay, let me try it again. And then that's when I started my dinner party series, Table of Influence. And that ended up going really well. I think I did it consistently for about 2 years. Yeah. Before I ended up at Rocksteady.
So I know you had mentioned pots and pans and being in New York, and it had made me remember when I had moved to New York, you know, with my little dream, and I was working for Puff was my first client, Sean Combs, and I was running around with pots and pans in literal plastic bags, right? This is how I hustled my position.
I had the IKEA bags and like burns on my arm.
Yes. So this is why I was bringing you back because I was like, hold on, like this mirrors what we got it out the mud. Like there's blood, sweat, and tears. And as women in a male dominated space, being Black women, you know, Caribbean descent, all of that plays a part. And also a thing called like pretty privilege, being light skinned. And when I say pretty privilege, people assuming that because we look like is why we got to the places that we were in. Right. And so when you're talking about running around New York City with pots and pans on the fucking subway. OK, listen.
Would not recommend.
Would not recommend. But listen. Do you understand? Do you understand the work? Because so many people where we're at, especially in the chef industry, since social media has taken on a totally different form, right? Because when you're in the early blog, it's like you're in the beginning of how all of this really came about. So it's easy to say that you're a chef, but you didn't put in time and experience. And so if you were mobbing around New York City with pots and pans and plastic IKEA bags, that just says something about what's really in you. And then also ultimately what type of leader you are to make your executive chef position at Rocksteady. Because even in Atlanta now, it's heavily populated with Black people and Black women. But in the chef industry still to 2023, you don't see us in executive chef roles or serving elevated food. So her food is complex, but straightforward. It's not anything that anyone misunderstands, but you do pay attention to your techniques, your colors, your textures, like all of those things play a part, and the ambiance. There's live music at this place for people that haven't experienced Atlanta. And so like it's a big thing what you've accomplished and where you're at in your career right now. And so that's why I'm like, I'm just so happy that you showed up and made time for me, because she's a boss out here, you know? So I want you guys definitely to get your Google on even after this interview, so so you guys have a better understanding. So you were carrying the pots and pans around in New York, and then you worked a few years out here, and you got your position at Rocksteady as
a prep cook. So I started as a prep cook. The restaurant hadn't opened yet, and we were still in the initial phases of developing the menu. But of course, I had recipe writing experience. So even a lot of the stuff that I worked on originally when we opened the restaurant, a lot of those recipes we still make. Like our jerk barbecue sauce, that's my recipe. The empanadas, that's my recipe. All of the desserts are my recipes. But how I ended up doing pastry was while we were coming
the
up.
desserts was really the best part. I loved it. So I'm like super excited.
Thank you.
I'm like excited for what you're about to do there. So
while we were coming up with the menu, nobody else had any pastry experience. And I only had some pastry experience because when I was I almost forgot about this. When I was in Atlanta, I actually worked at a French bakery.
Okay.
When I moved back, when I was in Atlanta, before I moved to New York. It was a French bakery run by French people, like a French couple. So I had that base of the technique because I think the French make the best pastries.
The best.
The Italians are right underneath the French.
First of all, if you know how to make a croissant and you can make it all day, every day in your sleep, you're badass in the kitchen.
Yeah. So I think I always had like some kind of like space in my heart for like Paris and France. And then when I was in New York, one of the places I worked at was a pie shop. So I just had just general experience with pastry. So,
but you started with the Easy Bake Oven, though.
I started with the Easy Bake Oven.
Let's shout out to the Easy Bake.
So while we were developing the recipes for the restaurant, I was just like, I'll work on the dessert menu. And then I just stopped doing prep and just ended up just doing pastry from there. So that's how I ended up becoming the pastry chef. And, you know, I wasn't the strongest at the time, but since that was the only thing that I was doing. You applied
yourself, though.
I just kept
But you
trying
applied
stuff.
Yourself. They couldn't do it.
Yeah, nobody else could do it.
They couldn't do it.
Nobody else could do it.
You're over here minimizing. I just write recipe writing is hard as fuck. Because a lot of chefs don't write recipes.
Yeah,
like,
no.
A lot of them don't.
That's the only way you have consistency.
A lot of them aren't good.
Consistency with a strong recipe. So I do pride myself on the dessert menu because it stood the test of time.
Right.
Because everything's still consistent. And there's certain things I can't even take off the menu because it's just
people
like
just
crowd favorites. I'm like, I'm changing the menu and I take something off and everybody's all upset.
Yes. When I was reading up on you, I kind of had picked up on you went through a phase of self-doubt when you were, I think, figuring out like your voice, but I keep thinking like it was all right there. It's been right there the whole time. Like,
but like I told you, I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere. Right. Like, you know, I was trying. That's the one thing I am going to do. I'm always going to try. Like, I'm not going to give my validation to the outside world.
Right.
So I validate myself. So I just constantly try. So to the outside, it possibly looked like I was like bouncing around and like, now I'm doing this and now I'm doing the dinner parties and now I'm doing pastry.
You were working.
But I was just trying, and like I can self-teach, you know, I can learn, I can read books, I can, you know, research, and everything you can figure out. Like I had the attitude that I can just figure it out. Like I feel like I'm skilled enough to have the basis.
Right.
You know, I had my knife skills, I had pastry experience, I had restaurant experience, I had editorial experience. You know, I had enough to get started. So I just figured it out.
So, but how did you feel being in such a predominantly male dominated space? Like, how did you gain like your respect, I guess? Like, what did you go through like moment where you're like, you know what? Actually.
So this is just a quick side story. So I think, and nobody believes me because I always say this, but for the longest, I was a super, super shy and very timid girl, like even up until after I left college. So this is a side story, but one of the odd end jobs that I had was I was selling cars.
Okay. I love it.
I know, right? So this is where I feel like I learned how to really like
sell.
Like, you don't nobody mess with me. So I was selling cars and then I was around men. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, okay, I found myself in a space where I'm constantly around men. But what I learned, men don't back down. If they think that you owe them money, or if they think that, you know, they're the best at something, they're the best. Like, right. Even if they're not,
right.
You know, and
right. Even if they're not,
or, you know, if they're negotiating, they just do whatever they do with confidence.
Straightforward. I always say, don't blink. And
I learned the art of negotiation. Yes. And from there, I just learned to stand up for myself. Cause I was like, oh, if they're fighting over $100 on the deal or $500 on the deal, then I need to be fighting for my money too. I need to make sure all my checks are correct and I'm getting my commission.
The checks cut
and I'm
rent.
Getting my money, because that's what all the men were doing. So
exactly.
That's really where I learned to break out of my shell.
I love that. She was like, it's a side story. No, girl, this is, because I'm over here thinking it's what you went through in the kitchen. And you're like, hold on, the real story.
So that's where I learned to speak up for myself.
I love it.
So I just carried that with me ever since.
And so that kind of goes into, I wanted to touch on, is contract negotiations. And well, you already said earlier in the conversation, the lowest you had worked for, or when you decided to make a change, was like $12. Mm-hmm. So when you're negotiating contracts, what do you think people should know?
I mean, you always want to do your research. You don't want to just
do your research. Don't just be going and not knowing.
You just don't want to just throw something out and hoping that it will stick. Like, for anything that I do, I look at other job postings. Mm-hmm. I see what other jobs are going for, how much they're paying other people with the same skill set that I have, or, you know, if it's recipe writing, what are my rates? What are the comparison rates that other recipe writers are, you know, charging? And I come up with something that works for me, but I just don't on the whim, just like, oh, I deserve this just because, like, no, I do my research and I do what I think makes sense, but
you're also qualified.
Yeah, though. Again, that's also I'm worth whatever.
You're also qualified.
I'm worth whatever I'm going to ask for any project. Mm-hmm. But honestly, I haven't had a problem. Like, even when I was making cakes at the time, people order cakes from me. My prices were my prices. My dinner parties, my prices were my prices. I actually never really had a problem with people.
My prices aren't up for negotiation.
No, and I'm like, listen, I'm exclusive. If y'all want me, y'all gotta pay for me because my time is tight.
Okay, you better pay for that. Okay,
y'all want Chef Bree?
You gotta pay for me.
Y'all gotta pay for me.
Pay for it. Okay, and then so, are you comfortable with giving numbers about like what it should look like? Because a lot of people, even though a lot of people don't do their Googles, a lot of people don't do research and they just jump out there. What do you think is like the minimum that somebody should be taking in the market right now, up into what you think in the position where you're at, a ballpark range of where people you think should be?
I'll probably get ballpark range. I do a lot of stuff based off of percentages too. So let's say if I'm catering. So the way that I normally price my dinners, or if I, was doing like a dinner party or whatever, mm-hmm. I do a 30% food cost. Okay. So whatever.
You're not doing 36 or 34? What isn't it 36 or 34?
My food, whatever I'm doing, it's max. Yeah, max okay. 30. So whatever, let's say
that's a good book.
Yeah, let's say if the client want steak, scallops, whatever. I'm like, y'all can have whatever you want. Mm-hmm. Okay. But also we're in an economy with inflation. So given the prices now, I'll approve a menu. And then I'll go back and estimate. I mean, I'm in the stores all the time and I'm dealing with vendors all the time. So I have a general idea of what certain items cost. So like, if I can get something at Kroger, if I get something at Publix or the farmer's market.
Yeah, because when you're catering, and even private chefing, you don't just, sometimes you go to 3, 4, 5 stores.
You go to a lot of places. So,
so that's time. That's working time. Just for y'all that don't understand what it costs.
So I'll price out a guesstimate of what I think my budget is going to be. And then I just make sure my food cost is at 30% because I'm spending so much time. And then I'm actually having to go cook the food and, set up. And I need to make sure that my margin is going to be 70% because at this point, I usually always have an assistant or somebody work with me. So I have to have, some margin to where I pay my staff, but I pay my staff well, right? Because I want them to come back
when you call.
One, because I need them, and I also want whomever to be like, oh, I love working for Chef Bree because she always pay us. Yes, So I never have a problem. If I call somebody, I'm like, yo, I need I need some help. I always got somebody to come help me.
Important.
They know
Relationships
are important. They know I'm going to pay them. They know I'm going to pay them a fair range. Yeah.
Okay, so getting back to Rocksteady. Let's go deeper into that and tell me where you're at currently and where you plan to take it.
So currently, this is my first month in. Okay. I am the executive chef.
Executive chef means she runs the show.
I run the show. Yeah. Executive chef of Rocksteady ATL, Atlanta.
Say it. Let them know. Come back.
We do Afro-Caribbean food. Yes. We have 2 floors. So the main floor, the main dining room is downstairs. And we also have a lounge upstairs.
I haven't been upstairs yet.
You've never been upstairs? Everybody's like, it's a vibe. It's a vibe. I tend to stay downstairs because there's...
I have to check it out.
It's 2 different experiences for sure. We have live DJs every single night, upstairs and downstairs. So we have a rotation of DJs. And I will say we run a very large operation. We're open 7 days a week. So the kitchen is essentially never closed. We always have events. We have a lot of high profile events. We have a lot of high profile guests that come in.
Like what? They like to hear. The people like to know.
You guys want to know the names? The name dropping. So we've done private events we did an Amazon influencer event.
That's a big account.
We've done an event with BET for their sisters premiere.
Good account.
We've done a private event for Revolt TV.
That's a good account.
We've done lots of kind of like big name events, and then we'll do a lot of different kind of themed parties, of course, with the Afro-Caribbean vibe to it. And we're open.
But you guys have live music too, right?
No, just DJs.
Really? I feel like
sometimes they might have performed. Sometimes we might have like a one-off event where it's like a open.
Oh, maybe it was just happened to be the night I was there.
It might have been. Yeah, we might have had like 1 or 2 like special events where maybe like an artist is doing like a album
release.
Yeah, like an album release or like a little small set. Or maybe somebody's doing like a drum set or something.
Yeah, when I was there, it was drums.
Yeah, maybe somebody's doing like a little drum set.
I thought that was like what y'all did. I was like, oh, this is nice. I like this.
Absolutely. But for context, let's say, so because we're open 5 days or 7 days a week, at this point on any given Friday or Saturday, we're doing well over 500 covers. So I just want people to understand the volume.
Yes.
That we're running.
But what's a typical cover for people that don't really understand? Like typical pace is like 2.
So a cover is essentially the amount of guests that actually are coming in to dine and are ordering food. So if a couple comes in, that's 2 covers because that's 2 people that are going to essentially order food. So we're considered high volume at this point. And honestly, I don't know what other restaurants in Atlanta are doing.
5.
The volume that we're doing. So on average, I think for other restaurants, a high number would be maybe around 200 to 250.
Because that's what I've been hearing from other ones that are doing high volume. That's why
our high volume
is a lot.
Yeah.
Because you're saying it just like, even though you know that it's a lot, people out there that might not, for my little Chefies, anybody that hasn't had the experience, that is an extreme amount to put in per day and to be consistent for people to keep coming back. Because that's the only way you stay in business is the people that keep coming back.
Consistency is with key. Strong recipes.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
work.
Exactly.
So everything comes together.
But don't you think that you've gained that extra level of respect because you pretty much started out at the bottom there and are now at the top?
Yeah, I think my tenure, just seeing the different chefs that have been at the restaurant, understanding the culture of the restaurant and understanding how we operate, I think that has given me an advantage to be able to take on this role.
Right.
So as of right now, I'm just, figuring out, what vendors. I have a lot of power, I guess I would say, because I get to figure out what vendors I want to order from. Everybody wants our account because we're spending a lot of money.
Right.
There's no way we're doing 500 covers multiple days through the week and even maybe 600 covers sometimes without spending money. So everybody wants our account. I have vendors always calling me, but I'm just trying to organize it in a way that it makes sense for my kitchen,
right?
And my staff. And I'm the advocate for the kitchen.
She's making changes is what she's saying.
Yeah, I am.
She's making changes.
So I'm just slowly flipping the menu as far as pulling off dishes that are
not selling
from previous chefs, switching out those dishes.
It's hers
any dishes that we've had issues with, trying to fix those, pull those off, put up new dishes. We're working on a brunch menu, so we're gonna do brunch Saturday and Sunday. So working on that brunch menu. So it's a big operation. I have a big team as well. So I think also gaining the trust of your team because they know I don't play. There's little to no room for error. So I'm definitely, like I told you, I'm reserved, to myself when I'm not at work. But when I'm in the kitchen, no. If I'm working, don't play with her. Because if I'm working and I'm moving all night, I expect everybody else to be working. If you're not working, I expect you to ask me.
There's a lot of executive chefs who are not in the
because y'all not about to be standing up, not doing nothing. Okay,
off in the corner.
No, absolutely not.
There's always something to do. Actually, if you ever come and tell the boss there's nothing to do, that's like
that means you going home.
That means you got to leave.
Yeah, that means you got to go home.
There's always something.
Go ahead and clock out.
Bye. But
my team, they want to work. Everybody wants to work. So, I always have stuff for them to do.
Because you've gained their trust, but they're also like happy to be there. And that's really irreplaceable.
Yeah. I think the true testament was it was my birthday on Thursday and I was, I didn't really have any plans.
Happy belated birthday.
Thank you. And I didn't really have any plans. And then, so I obviously I came into work. But everybody's like, why are you so surprised? But I was so surprised. Like my prep team had got me a little wine bottle with chocolates and all these gifts. My pastry assistants, they have got me some gifts. My mom sent me flowers and they're like, Bree, just go home. And I was like, wow, y'all really, I'm going to say this, but I was like, yeah, y'all really fuck with me the long way.
You can't say that. I've been cussing you the whole time.
Dang, wow. I was like, oh my gosh, you guys really appreciate me because I was just gonna come to work like normal. But they did send me home. So I worked a half a day.
No, but a lot of executive chefs get to that position and they don't work anymore. Really, it's they come, they shake hands, kiss babies, they work the books.
No, I gotta stay on top of everybody because
she's hands-on.
We're too busy. We're too busy because if anything happens, management is coming to me. They're not gonna go to anybody else. So I pride myself on building up my reputation, and obviously I'm aligned with a restaurant that's really popular in Atlanta. So everybody thinks I'm personally cooking the food.
People don't understand that.
Everybody thinks I'm the one making the food. So, if they think that, then I need to make sure that everything is on point. But I have to heavily rely on my team, and I'm constantly training. Like I'm always like correcting people because, anybody could be doing the same thing for forever, but get a little lax here and there, and we don't have space for that. I'm always on everybody's head.
Yeah, I think when I was one of my chefs when I was training used to always put me in spots that I was like slower in. And so tell me about your recipe for success. If you could tell someone who's interested in being in your position 3 things, or your younger self, what are those top 3 things?
I think the recipes for success for me and also my team is consistently and constantly learning.
Okay.
The learning never stops. Even I don't know everything. And if I have a question, I'm going to go ask somebody else.
Okay.
But always learning, always teaching yourself, solving the problem, being a self-thinker, thinking for yourself, thinking independently.
Okay. Is that 2 or 3? Was that one?
Was a few.
Okay.
Always learning, being an independent thinker, and being solution oriented.
Okay, because you can't mess up and get stuck in the problem. You got to find the solution.
I'm like, y'all got to figure it out.
Get it together.
Figure it out.
Yeah. Figure it out. We don't even got the time for you to be emotional about this. Let's move on.
I'm like, go figure it out and tell me what the solution is. And I'll decide if that was right or wrong.
You better go fix it and stop wasting my time. Okay. And then, so that was for our recipe for success and for our palate cleanser.
Okay.
When you're cooking in the kitchen, what are you listening to?
I'm an R&B girly.
Okay.
I'm a SZA girl, her.
Okay.
Of course, Brianna.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm definitely like an R&B girl.
Okay. And then after cooking in the kitchen all day, long day work, what are you eating? What are you making for yourself?
I actually eat a lot of salads. My personal palate is pretty simple.
Right. But no, this is like when you're tired. At the end of the day, you've been cooking all day. What are you eating?
Yeah, probably just like a little salad with a piece of fish or a piece of shrimp. Or I asked one of my cooks to make me something. Okay. But usually like rice and vegetables and a piece of fish.
Okay.
And a salad.
Because I feel like chefs always have weird diets. Like I'm a sandwich and cereal girl.
Yeah, I'm pretty simple. Salad. Or like a salad or mixed fruit. Okay. I always do like to have like a little sweet thing. So maybe a piece of chocolate or a cookie, but pretty simple, not anything too crazy. Okay. And oatmeal.
Okay.
I know. I love oatmeal.
All right. I like that. And then for dessert, I know we didn't really talk too much about it, but you did do some television. You won Raid the Fridge. Do you have any aspirations of, I know where you're at right now, but even having a show about the kitchen, like a real one, or like, somebody following you and showing a day in the life of, and then you picking, like people don't see that stuff. So do you have any thoughts about having your own show?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think I would love to be some kind of food personality. I don't see myself being a chef in the kitchen for like 5 more years. Because for me now, it's definitely physically demanding. So I think I have a couple more years, but I would love to like transition into
I see it.
Yeah, I would love to transition.
It's already a show right there. You better find a cameraman.
Yeah, I would love to do
talk
that.
To the bosses. I got the vision.
I think so. I would love to transition into
all right there. You have your whole kit and everything.
A personality or even like a travel cooking, Afro Caribbean situation. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm going to stay in the kitchen, but I don't see myself like trying to move to another restaurant or this is my last
I always tell
restaurant
people
and my last executive chef
I always
job
tell people because I'm
tired.
An exit plan.
Yeah.
Have an exit plan.
That's my exit plan. Thank you for asking. That's exactly what I want to do.
Yeah, I see it, girl.
Yeah.
I see it. Watch manifest in like a year or two. I'm telling you, camera crew. All you gotta
y'all better pull up to Rocksteady because after a couple of years, I'm done. I'm out the kitchen.
Out of there. I love it. And so for our outro, where do you really want to take Rocksteady before you like close it out?
Obviously, my goal, we're a popular restaurant, so I want to make food.
One of the top.
Yeah. I want to make food that's popular. Right. That's a hit that people want to become because it's all over Instagram. Rocksteady's all over Instagram. We're all over TikTok. I want to make food. And you nailed it as far as my style goes. That's exactly what my style is. It's complicated, but it's still simple. It's not
simple. It's approachable.
It's bold. It's very colorful. But that's like my personality. My plates are pretty clean. Yes. I love like coming up with nice plating, but that's a little bit simple because again, we're a high volume restaurant. I can't come up with something that's super crazy and super technical because we have 500 covers. We have to get the food out. Yeah, we have to get the food out in 15 max, maybe 20 minutes. So I'm having to think about, recipes and dishes that are efficient, that are quick, that can be done during prep, that is beautiful. The plating is beautiful, but it's also easy for my team to get done, to get all that food out the window.
Right.
But yeah,
which is a task in itself. So
yeah, so it's a whole thought process. Like, it's not just like, oh,
but I like that you're taking charge and changing things as a woman in the kitchen. Okay, this is a boss right here.
Right. If it got my name on it, okay. If it got my name on it,
if you didn't know,
it's gonna be done correctly.
And so before we completely wrap it up, I know that you had dinner party in Jamaica. Yeah. Are you gonna be doing more of those or taking those on the road? Do you want to do that once a year? You already have a built-in team. Have you thought about that?
I would love to do maybe Jamaica a little bit more consistently, for sure. I still have family there. Yes. I did it at my family's house. It was so beautiful. I had so much support. Even the Jamaican Observer, the editor, was there. I'm popping in Jamaica. Y'all better not.
Want to take it beyond there? Thailand, when you went to Thailand?
No, I think I want to stay true to. I think I just want to stay true to the roots. Yeah, stay true to my roots. I don't gotta go past what I know. I don't have to go past that. But I would love to consistently, always do something in Jamaica for sure. I love that. Yeah, because I know we have a florist. I had a lot of vendors.
That's a show too. I just feel like
I had a lot of vendors that I worked with. So I would love, for sure, I would definitely do another dinner party in Jamaica.
So she'll be doing a dinner party series?
Yeah, maybe. I wouldn't mind doing one across the Caribbean, going to Trinidad, going to Barbados.
Girl, I'm telling you.
I'm an island gal. I'm an island girl.
Hey, y'all better thumbnail that. I said all that. I see it already.
Yeah, I'm an island girl, so I don't mind going to different islands.
Okay. And so where can everybody find you?
You can find me on Instagram. I'm on Twitter now. I love Twitter, but everything is at Seasoning Bottle. One word, Seasoning Bottle. You better go find her. Okay. Thank you, Briana Riddock, for joining me. Thank you. And you better go check out Rack Steady if you haven't. ATL Atlanta, one of the hottest spots. Thanks, Chefies, for tuning in. Thank you.